Well, thank you very much, Representative and Representatives, for being here today. We appreciate the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about these reform proposals that the General Assembly and the House Republican Caucus has brought forward here today. Under the first year of leadership of Governor Kasich at the Bureau, we have been successful on several fronts. We've decreased base rates. We've brought stability and understandability to Ohio's rate-making process. We've coordinated our premium discounts in a single premium package called Destination Excellence. We've begun programs to incentivize new businesses in Ohio and create healthier workplaces through our Workplace Wellness Grant program as well as other safety initiatives. These are things that are good. These are things that are going to help our system. However, in spite of these achievements in stabilizing and improving our system, I continue to be haunted by the declining rate of return for injured workers in Ohio. Some of you who've been at other events with me have seen this chart. We've talked about it across the state. What it portrays is just in the last 5 years, Ohio's return to work rate, measured by those who've lost time from their claims, has fallen from something close to 76% now to below 69%. What that means is that more and more workers are trapped for longer and longer periods of time in the workers' comp system. My firm belief is that once an injury has occurred, the employer and the injured worker must have a similar goal: get the injured worker back to work. Not only is this the best for the employer in keeping costs low and ensuring efficiency in the workplace, but it is what is best for the injured worker who wants to get back providing for himself and his family. When I've discussed these problems with the governor, he's asked me to get as much accomplished as I can internally without legislative help. We have engaged our employees and our stakeholders for better triaging of claims, better medical management, smarter and more controlled use of pharmaceuticals in our system, more settlements, and better access to rehabilitation. These efforts are ongoing. However, today we come to the legislature with a narrow set of reforms that we believe are necessary to take the next step in providing better outcomes for injured workers in our system. Let me, in a nutshell, tell you what the scope of the problem is. Too many workers remain in our system without a clear path to return to work. There are delays in the system that hinder a fast and safe recovery for injured workers. And throughout our system, there are points where there are lacks of accountability for all parties involved in aiding this return to work effort. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. The chart up here highlights what happens to a person who enters our system. The outer ring is what happens when there's an initial visit. Someone gets hurt in the workplace. They go, they see any provider, normally in an emergency room, an urgent care, something like that. And for this first period of time, normally something less than 72 hours, they can go anywhere they want for care. But once that care ends, they then enter the network that is established in our system of BWC certified providers. And that's this ring of providers. And there are today over 68,000 certified BWC providers in the state of Ohio that injured workers can choose to go to as they like. In the middle is something the statute set up and the legislature set up in the early 90s. And that is networks of MCO-driven providers. And the MCOs are our managed care organizations who are attached to every employer in Ohio who try to work and make sure that injured workers are receiving the care they should and that there's communication across all parties in the system. The statute set up these provider networks back in the mid-90s. However, in reality, they don't function. And they don't function because injured workers, again, are allowed to go anywhere they want within the certified network. The good news is that 93% of the time, injured workers who enter this ring return to work within 45 days. That's good news. But each year, 7,000 to 8,000 injured workers do not. And they linger in the system without a path to recovery. Research clearly shows that if an injured worker is not back to work within 30 days, the chances of him ever returning to work diminish significantly. In fact, what we've found in the Ohio system, for those missing 45 days, 57% of those will miss more than 120 days and be on a path that's not good for them or anywhere else. So we've got to correct this. And one of the things that this bill does is say that the injured workers who enter this system will have 45 days to go wherever they want within the certified providers. But if they haven't seen a recovery, if they haven't returned to work after 45 days from their date of injury, then they must go to what the statute has already created, and that is the network of providers that the MCOs will set up. So that's an explanation of one side of these very important reforms. The other side is also that we have problems in timely giving service today to injured workers. And this little timeline highlights it. As I mentioned before, from the moment someone's injured, they have roughly 72 hours to go where they want to go to get some type of emergency care. Then the injured worker waits. Our system will not pay providers for any type of service until BWC has made an initial determination on the claim. The statute gives us 28 days to do that. In reality, we get most of them done in 10 days, but there can be a wait as long as 28 days. Additionally, the statute says that we will not pay for any medical treatment until the appeals period, another 14 days in addition to the 28, is passed. Under those scenarios, an injured worker can sit at home waiting for up to 30 to 40 days. And then if an appeal actually comes, there's another statutory-driven waiting period under the Industrial Commission regime. In total, it can be up to 150 days from date of injury until the injured worker receives any type of paid treatment under the workers' comp system. Folks, that is not a positive way to deal with people and their health conditions if we want better outcomes in the system. And again, what the bill does, in part, is to provide a system where once the Bureau has made that initial determination, we will begin to make payments on behalf of that injured worker while the appeals, if in fact one comes, while the appeals process weaves its way through the system, thereby guaranteeing that the injured worker is getting health care provided as quickly as possible at the front end after his injury has occurred. That, in a nutshell, are what some of the more significant pieces of these bills are. There are a lot of important pieces, but these are the ones that I believe are really going to begin to address that first chart we looked at, return to work in the state of Ohio. What we're trying to do here, folks, is to fix a very well-defined problem, and that is getting all injured workers the care they deserve and get them back as quickly as possible to resume a high quality of life. This legislation holds everyone in the system accountable. Injured workers. The bill says they must comply with the treatment protocols that their doctors set out. Employers, as I mentioned, we're asking employers to pay for that care earlier on in the system. Pay for the first prescription that the injured worker needs at the pharmacy, even before the claim has been allowed, if it's likely that it will be allowed later. We're asking providers to have better performance. We're going to begin to measure that more thoroughly. We're asking MCOs to do a better job and partner with us. The bill creates a scorecard to measure how efficient they are on things like return to work. And in total, it will improve the system and make it more accountable through faster payments for appropriate service. Let me tell you briefly what this bill or these series of bills are not. These are not privatization. These are not competition. These are not benefit cuts. Those are all conversations for another day. These bills try to focus on what I believe is the most pressing problem. How do we have better outcomes for injured workers in our system? Let me mention a couple things that I believe some of the critics of these bills may say. The first they're going to say is we don't have enough providers. That's why the return to work numbers are what they are. As I mentioned earlier, BWC today has 68,280 certified providers. That's one provider for every 2 injured workers that had a claim in Ohio last year. Folks, that's a sufficient number of providers. That's not to say we won't continue to encourage good providers, good specialists to enter our system and be certified and be available to the injured workers. But the fact of the matter is, the real problem with providers is often that an injured worker doesn't know where to go to get the best type of help. Think of yourselves today if you were injured in the workplace. Who would you go to? Who would you see for your specific injuries? It can be a very daunting task. And in reality, when they face this daunting task, some of them find the right providers, and some of them don't. And for those injured workers who don't find the right provider, it can often lead to total disability, and in some cases, death. Some opponents of this bill may argue that this is radical and out of the norm. But folks, that's blatantly untrue. There are many states that require certain networks of physicians from the very first day of a claim. In other states, the employer picks the employee's doctor. Neither of those things is going on in this bill. Ohio law already contains MCO network providers. This bill simply does what was contemplated in the mid-1990s by the legislature, who created these panels of high-quality physicians who can get people back to work and on the job. This legislation says that the statutorily created networks will operate the way they were meant to operate those many years ago, and then only after 45 days of the employee's failure to get back to work. The final argument I believe you'll hear is that the system is fine. Leave it alone. Well, folks, I couldn't disagree more for those injured workers who enter our system and never leave. The system is not fine for Sharon, a real claimant who entered our system, a 51-year-old woman who was delivering flowers in 1997, tripped over a rug, falling to her knees. After $250,000 in total BWC spending, she's totally disabled today after tripping on a rug. The system is not fine for James, a 60-year-old worker who received burns on his feet in 1995 while walking on hot asphalt, who again, after $250,000 in BWC treatments and services, is permanently disabled. It's not a good system for Margaret, a 42-year-old assembly worker who cut her hand on a broken light bulb in 2004, and 6 years later, after more than $250,000 in BWC treatments, is totally disabled and will never work again. This system is not working for the injured workers who've seen a single chiropractor 800 times, and the large number of them who've seen chiropractors 500 times in their claims. And it certainly doesn't work for 8 different injured workers who exercised their medical free choice to find now decertified Dr. James Lundeen and died of drug overdoses under his care. Folks, we need to bring some sensible reforms to this system. Let me give you a couple of the stats in closing. Each month, 950 newly injured workers go off work. 15,000 of them remain off work every day in Ohio. 10,000 of those 15,000 have been off for more than 1 year in our system. 90 people each month will never go back to work again and become permanently, totally disabled. I'm pleased today that 93% of all of our injured workers get back to work within 45 days. We should celebrate that. But I will not quit pushing for reform that leads to a better outcome for all injured workers who can recover and want to do so. I appreciate the legislators who are joining me today to say that enough is enough. We must move forward with sensible, narrowly focused and tailored legislation that will help improve the BWC system for employers and injured workers alike. Thank you. I'm very pleased now to introduce the chairman of the committee, Jay Hottinger, to talk a little bit about the time frame for handling these bills.